So this is our last series, which is on friendship. And so we broke it down into two, which is art of conversation, and then the next part is friendship when things could possibly turn toxic. What do you do?
That's a good one.
Right, it's very relevant. So when we put this together, we kind of talked about, well, what is friendship exactly, right? Like, what is that? Well, what does it boil down to? It boils down to that. Like, how do you converse with people? How do you interact with people? Do you even know how to talk to people in an appropriate manner? Do you know how to use nonverbal cues? So that's why the title of this was not just friendship, it was more the art of conversation. Humans like talking. We talk a lot. And some are good at it, some could be happy hiding in a closet, but they find other ways of communicating. We still do this. So that's why this is called what it's called. So this is an icebreaker. You could just internalize it and you could put it somewhere if you wanted to. It could be how to start and maintain a conversation, right? Like you could bring up two people and go, have a few cues for them. This is with someone new that you meet at school, how do you maintain or keep the conversation going with someone? And then we'll have, a primer of what. And then when you're doing this, what you could even do, what you could even do at this point is like, don't use words. Just use body language to hold a conversation. And in this one, what we talked about is like the nonverbal. Our brains are wired to catch like millions of little nonverbal cues without us even knowing. So when you're texting, and this was something that I had asked the kids, I'm like, how do you lose that in the nonverbal when you're texting? No, we have emojis. Oh yeah? How many emojis? How many emojis do you need to convey one statement? Whereas when you're talking to a person face to face, your brain automatically processes the nonverbal a lot faster, a lot easier. So the one I think we had on this one was like you could print out on a piece of paper a response, and so this is the introduce yourself, find common interests. So this is an open-ended questions, not yes or no, but how, what, why, all those, and what do you talk about. For this, the nonverbal, what I had last year, I just wrote on a sheet of paper. Somebody asked me a question of, will you be at the party? And I said no. On one I said no, on one I said, and it's like if you called me, if you texted me that, like what does that no mean? No, I don't want to go with you. No, I'm not going. No, I wasn't invited. What does that no mean, right? It doesn't tell you anything. Whereas if you're face to face, it could be like, hey, going? No. That versus no. Versus no.
Makes you think I Saturday Night Live. Dude.
Yeah.
Dude.
I wanted to do that one. Yes. Or
Maybe we can use that.
you could absolutely use that. Yeah.
It's like, dude.
Yeah. Like, dude. Yeah.
So there's that one commercial where they're going over the railroad track. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I think we used that last year.
Which one?
Well, I don't know.
Is it
Saturday Night
Yeah,
Live?
you used, that was one of the ones we'd looked at 1 year, but I don't know if we used it in here, this one. I think this one is the Friends one.
Is
The,
it a Saturday Night Live? It's not. It's a commercial that was just on TV, and it's this car full of friends, and
Yeah.
they have coffee or something
Yeah,
in
yeah.
their hands, and they're going over a railroad track, and it's like some dude, like we're coming across this
Yeah.
railroad track, it's gonna get bumpy,
Yeah.
and then But you know, there's I don't know how many dudes, there's probably 12 different dudes in there. And then afterwards, they're like, dude, like we
made
spill
it.
we
Yeah.
made
Okay.
it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll find that one
So
too.
Oh yeah, it'd be great
But that's
to
a
know,
cute.
to pull up if
Yeah.
you remember what it was for coffee.
So the nonverbal, this is like the kids will immediately be like, "Oh, I have emojis." Really? Emojis. It's like we had to create how many thousands of emojis to type one text. So yeah, that's not very effective. So important stuff is still better face to face.
Well, and my kids will tell you that I'm forever using the wrong emoji.
Right, and you're like, explain that one. Yeah.
And we couldn't see it.
Well, I can't see what he's
You
doing.
know, I
I'm
thought
trying.
wink means wink, but no, it actually means flirt. So, but how would I know that? Not the straight wink. But
Yeah.
whichever one I grab. Christine was like, no,
I'm not
that's
very
just
good at
wrong.
them, so I don't
That's
do that.
flirting.
Yeah, like
Oh, sorry.
peach, the peach emoticon is for butt. It literally means butt. So I was like, okay, great. So once I learned that, I was like, you don't care. I'm like, so I emojied her rat and the peach. I'm like, yeah, there you go, rat's ass. Got it. So things you learn. An eggplant is a penis.
What?
I
Oh,
don't
wow.
know that one.
I
The
just
purple eggplant.
I just learned that.
Oh, it
Yeah.
is? Oh my.
So we've given
It
fruit.
says someone a penis.
anatomy.
So if you're putting out fruit, just please check with your teenager. What is this?
I don't think
What's
my
the other
kids
meaning
would
for
even know
this
that.
one?
I'm serious. I don't think I'm gonna find out.
Yes. Things you learn.
Eggplant.
So this is like, how do you could do this two ways. You could just talk about it and say, okay. So pick your hammy kids for the opener, because if it dies, it just falls flat. And we do talk about how there are touchy topics, religion, politics, personal family questions do sometimes fall under that private realm, which people aren't randomly gonna share with you unless there's a trust built up. So don't go probing, don't go fishing, don't ask around it. If somebody didn't answer a question, let it go. Let it go is a good policy. I mean, especially at the moment, right, with their teen, like such and such, I'm shipping so and so with so and so. Well, is that true? I don't know. Well, I'm gonna ask such and such about such and such's relationship with. Are you kidding me? Like, why would you do that? And why are you in their little fishbowl? Like, why? So these are the kind of things you want to be able to. So the best conversations begin with common interest, or you show interest in another person, their world, and relate it back to that me, you, and us. Remember, each of us has something interesting. Remember, each of us comes from a culture. Remember, each of us brings diversity. Remember, each of us has a life that is outside of here. Some of you are dancers, some of you are gymnasts, some of you are fashionistas, some of you can put on highlighter like nobody's business. There's interests here. Most people love to talk about themselves. And to have a great conversation, you also have to be a great listener. If you didn't hear a word of what the other person is saying, yeah, I actually lost that conversation. So, listening is also part of this exercise. So it's not that you're, hey, sabke liye chai laye? La. I'm like, if you're late, you have to bring tea for everybody.
So at this part too, I think it's the idea of being an extrovert and introvert.
Yeah.
Is very valid in terms of how we engage
Right.
in conversations, how willing we are. It's a lot to do with.
So knowing yourself, going back, connecting to the me, you, and us is definitely like, remember who you are in a conversation. You don't, and there was another line, I think it was probably from a blog, I read, I forget which one, it'll come to me at some point. And he says, remember who you belong to. When you're having a conversation, remember where your roots come from. Would this embarrass your great grandmother? Well, then don't have that conversation. Can you go in front of a judge and admit to this conversation? If you can't, then don't have it.
When I used to practice law, and we would tell our people that we advise is that when you're writing an email, just picture it on the
Billboard?
on the screen in a
courtroom.
in front of a jury. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's whatever email should be able to survive that scrutiny.
Yeah. You should be able to stand behind it. Yep. Any conversation that you have with another human being, you should be able to stand behind it. Absolutely. And conversation, bring in the social media aspect of stuff. The conversations that you're having online are exactly what you're having. If you're mean in person, you'll be mean online. If you're mean online, you'll be mean in person. That's kind of where you're going with this. You don't get a pass because you hid behind an anonymous screen. You don't get a pass. Actually, it's worse because then it's for perpetuity. Somebody took a screenshot of it, that's your reputation. This is who you are now. You're that person who does that. So keep that in mind. And conversations are supposed to be fun. They're supposed to be something that is adding value. And not adding value as in like, I'm gonna make the next $1 million off of this. No, it's more I walked away happy. And if you didn't walk away happy, well, reevaluate what that conversation was all about then. And then, no, and conversation is not always winning. You don't always win. There's no winning. Unless you're in law, in which case you get paid for that. But
And conversation isn't always easy.
it is not always easy. No.
It might be something difficult to talk about. Not just that the person is not participating well, but
Yeah, and some people are happy being listeners. They'd rather be okay, you telling them everything and doing the data dump on them and be like, oh, that's awesome. And there's situations for that as well. Just accept it. These are some icebreakers. It's like, are you running track? What do you think we should have done differently at our last meet? I mean, you could come up with your own too, depending on what you know of your kids in your class by now. What did you do last weekend? That always works. It's an open-ended kind of, right? And always remember people like talking about themselves. So, show interest, be an active listener. Talk about something specific to that person if you know. If you don't know them well enough, then you could find things in common. And this is like a little script.
And is that to practice or demonstrate the last slide?
Yeah.
The two volunteers?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah. And again, some of these slides, you don't have to show them all. You could gloss over it. If you've talked about it already, then gloss over it. If you want to have it up while they're talking. So these are notes that you want to be reading so you can guide that conversation. So things like, eye contact. People like, depending on the cultures, people like to touch people as they're talking. Not all cultures, but some cultures do, and some cultures don't. And there's also a level of respect that's built into if you're talking to an adult versus you're talking to a child. So all of those from the lesson U, where there's culture and diversity, all of those come into play when you're having a conversation. And like I said, practice active listening. And people react differently to you. Not everybody's gonna like what you have to say. Not everybody's gonna hate what you have to say, and that's totally fine. That's the human experience. So part of this is also entering a conversation and exiting a conversation. Words like, it was great talking to you, we should do this again, I have a class to go to, talk to you later, I will, all of those are also part of, you can start a conversation but also know how to end graciously.